Hi Leo, welcome to your June 2018 Astro Update. My name is Raina, and in June, it's going to be a study of contrasts for you, Leo, because the Sun starts out the month in the 11th house, and Mercury is there as well as the month begins. The 11th house is the house of your friendships and other social affiliations, in other words, groups that you may belong to. So this, because you're ruled by the Sun, this seems to bode well for any endeavors that involve other people, especially the collective. And this can be good if you are trying to network, either because you work in a corporate environment and you need to, schmooze with people, or if you work for yourself and you're trying to expand your client base, and you do so especially through your friendships or your acquaintances. Because I want to just emphasize that the people that we socialize with don't necessarily have to be our best buddies. They can be acquaintances. And actually, the ruler of the 11th house is your opposite sign, Aquarius. And Aquarians are famous, or you could even say infamous, for their detached interactions with other people where they consider everyone their friend, even their lover. And there's not this kind of distinction being made. And that's the kind of thing that you're starting the month with. Mercury is there, so you're very communicative about various things to these people. But then on the 12th, Mercury goes into the 12th house. And it's almost like going into the dungeon, and I'm just being facetious. The 12th house is ruled by Pisces. So you can get a feel for those kinds of keywords that may come up. It's the house of self-undoing, the place that we trip ourselves up with our patterns that don't serve us. It's the house of the mystical, the house of karma, past lives, anything that is not of this world. Now, the opposite house of Pisces is the 6th house, and the opposite sign is Virgo. So the 6th house is physical health, while the 12th house is mental health. And the 6th house is your daily routine. The 12th house is very, I don't want to say chaotic, but it definitely is open-ended. It's not defined. That's what the ruler Neptune is all about, is a lack of distinction. And with Mercury there, your thoughts may not be precise. They may be more geared towards spiritual matters than practical matters. And I think it's very important to talk about the 12th house influences, because they really set the stage for your new solar cycle. The 12th house is the last house, and it's the place to finish up the business of the past solar cycle. And when those personal planets cross over the threshold of the first house to the 12th house to the first house, then you're having that new beginning. Anytime you have a planet, even an outer planet, in the first house, it starts a new cycle for your particular chart. And the whole point of a new cycle means that each house is incrementally bringing you to that climax of the 12th house. Because if you start with the first house, it's the house of the self, even the body, coming into this material world. So you're coming into this material world. Where are you coming from? The spiritual world, which is the 12th house. So right now, I don't want to say right now, because you are experiencing in June, different things happening with different planets. So I don't want to just limit it to one area. But the Sun begins in that 11th house, and then on the solstice, which is the June 21st, when the sun goes into Cancer, as it does every year on the solstice, it will be that 12th house for the sun. But until that point, Mercury is there first. And so you may feel more, well, it's funny, I was going to say you may feel like you're in hermit mode more at this time, but that's not entirely true. I think that will be more true after the third week, because the sun is still in that 11th house. So it may be quite interesting, the kind of conversations you have with friends for about 10 days or 9 days before the sun joins Mercury in that 12th house. Don't expect to have clarity of thought or communicate that clearly when Mercury is in the 12th house. But it's actually a good thing, because your mind is naturally going to be more focused on interior things rather than just spouting your opinions and making chit-chat. So it's a good time to meditate for sure. On the 13th, the very next day, Venus goes into your sign. So this is really good for Leos, even though your mind is like on some spiritual plane, your body is rocking. It's very attractive to other people. However, let's talk about those first 13 days when Venus is in the 12th house. How does Venus act in the 12th house? Well, there may be some people who, if you meet a potential partner, may feel that sense of recognition, that sense of knowing this person. And that kind of feeling creates this, like, karmic connection. And I always remind people, when you feel that this is the case, to really think about the possibility that our lives are continuous. Our incarnations, our different lifetimes may, have delineations of when you're born and when you die, in air quotes, but it still is that consciousness surviving the so-called end and coming around the bend again. So there's never like a stop of consciousness. And therefore, any relationships that you have really don't have beginnings and endings. They're just like continuous stories, narratives. And if this character in the play called life, shows up in your, walks on stage in your life, and you say, wow, I think I've seen this movie before. Maybe you have seen the movie before, but maybe you didn't like it the first time around. So make sure that you're not just intrigued by the sense of familiarity. Because, the first thing that popped into my mind when I said this, familiarity breeds contempt. And karmic relationships may be problematic relationships. However, far be it from me to discourage people from engaging these people, because maybe there is unfinished business. Maybe you obviously if somebody's showing up, there's probably a reason for it. So I'm not suggesting that you ignore somebody, but just keep in mind that it may not mean they're your soulmate, but simply that you have more to work on in this relationship. But speaking of soulmates, perhaps you meet somebody who is your soulmate. The other thing that I was thinking is that because Venus has recently been in that 11th house, it's possible that you have met somebody through your circle of friends and started dating them, but haven't told all of your friends that you and this person are an item. And it could be that around mid-June, you decide to take the relationship public, because then Venus goes in your first house. You're not hiding anything. Whenever Venus is in the 12th house, there's always the possibility of some kind of clandestine affair where you are on the down low with somebody. You're sneaking around. Now, obviously, if you have something to hide or they have something to hide, it sounds to me like there's an extramarital affair going on. So I'm just trying to, keep it real here, folks. But I still feel that even if that's true, that you may decide, I'm going to bring this out into the light of day. I'm tired of sneaking around. On the same day that Venus goes into your sign, there's a new moon in that 11th house, which is really wonderful because the 11th house and Gemini is a friendly angle to you. And here you have Venus in your sign, Leo. So this bodes very well for you socially, for you to gain your contacts, your friendships, and this could benefit you in many different ways. Also, with the new moon in the 11th house, you may have the opportunity to realize a long-desired goal, a dream that you have had. On the 18th, Neptune turns retrograde. And for you, this is in the 8th house of sex, death, other people's money. That's the only way I know how to say it. It also is the house of metaphysics. So, I don't know if this had happened in the 9th house for you. I think that it could be possibly some kind of religious figure who turns out to be a charlatan. But in the 8th house, I don't know. I can't think of any particular spiritual connotations to it, because let me just say that Neptune retrograde casts out illusions depending on what house it's in. So an example would be with the 8th house. Since it's other people's resources, you may finally come to terms with a partner's money problems, okay? So let's say that Neptune retrograde is ending denial about something, because Neptune can be about delusions, illusions, and the retrograde eradicates them, or exposes them, I should say. So if you have had a spouse who perhaps there have been like some irregularities regarding their finances, maybe they even told you a story and you find out for sure what's happening. That can be, I mean, it depends on how bad it is. It could either be a minor irritation or it could be a major revelation that is unpleasant. It can be a time when you let go of, it's not really letting go, but you admit to yourself something that you have told yourself that involves any kind of abuse of power, including sexual abuse that you were the victim of, or that it could be that is occurring around you and you have to face the music, or at least, deal with the truth of the matter. And really, all of this is an internal process. This isn't necessarily some secret that is exposed to, the outer world. This would be more of something that you do for yourself. So I like that in the sense that it's part of your own spiritual growth. So as I said before, the sun goes into that 12th house on the 21st. And so this is a time of more of retreat, of hibernation until you have your solar return in late July. This is important. On the 26th of the month, Mars goes retrograde in Aquarius, your opposite sign, 7th house of relationships. What can that mean? Well, that's the house of marriage, the house of committed partnership. So there could be something else that needs to be worked on. Mars is about applying your energy to something. It is about your ambition, your drive. But to me, it's also about conflict. So to me, a Mars retrograde can open up an old conflict. So if there is something related to matters involving perhaps a marriage issue that was never really handled, then perhaps either, this could be like going back to couples counseling and working more on your marriage. Now, this is the point where I have to say something. I'm a pretty opinionated person, so I tend to irritate people sometimes with my little asides, but I can't help it. That's just how I roll. And one thing that I think is important that at least this is my opinion, is that if you have to work really hard in a marriage, what does that really mean about the relationship? Why do people have to work hard at it? It usually, to me, implies that that these two people are very, very different types of people. So accommodating one another's needs is a full-time job. Because if you're on the same page with somebody, then you kind of think alike to a certain degree, and you have the same basic values, and you kind of want to go in the same direction. You're kind of in agreement about a lot of things. Yes, they talk about opposites attracting. Sometimes I think that's more of a physical attraction than an actual compatible lifestyle choice. Because logic would have, it only stands to reason that if you have wildly divergent opinions about life, that it's going to be hard to integrate the needs of both parties into a healthy marriage. So this is where a counselor comes in. And by the way, I'm not putting down people for attempting marriage counseling, because I think that if you have made a commitment to somebody, you owe it to yourself to at least try, you know what I mean? Instead of just walking away and acting like it's your way or the highway. I do think that you can always learn something about yourself in these types of settings. However, I'm referring to the couples that, have this as an ongoing thing throughout their marriage because they just can't seem to agree. And so they need this referee to kind of get them on the same page, at least as much as possible. So at some point during this retrograde, which is going to be a 2-month process, Mars will go direct on August 27th. So at some point, it will dip back into a late degree of Capricorn, which will be your 6th house, Leo. And I will talk about that when we get there. As I say, I think it'll be late July. And so that will be for the next forecast. But for now, watch out for anything that seems to come up with a relationship. This could also involve, though, some kind of like partnership, because the fact that it's going back into your 6th house suggests a work-related type of thing, with either that you went into partnership with somebody and then there was some kind of a falling out, and you need to sort something out along those lines, or your clients, some kind of an issue with clients. However, as I said before, talking about all of that activity in the 11th house, it's possible that you're reaching back to people that you may have kind of fallen out of contact with and are more engaged with them again. Maybe you kind of let some clients slip through your hands and you're trying to actively get them back onto your side. And then we end the month with a full moon in Capricorn on the 28th. And this will be in your 6th house of health and work, your daily schedule, and things like that. Now, because Mars is going to eventually go into this sector, this could be the time where you learn something. Let's say about coworkers that you didn't know. Maybe a secret comes out, and that eventually paves the way for you to reopen some matter that was maybe a conflict with your place of employment. This could be the ending of a place of employment for you. Also, this could be a time where you get a promotion. I mean, it really runs the gamut. When the moon is full, this is very fertile energy. So it can bring things to culmination that you've been working on. And culmination, although it means ending, it doesn't mean that you're ending this particular business, but perhaps a work project. However, for some people, it might be the time when you're leaving a workplace, for sure. The 6th house can represent the workplace. And in terms of health, this could be a time when you learn of something that you couldn't quite put your finger on health-wise. You may find out what is going on with you. And it's a time of detox. The full moon is a time of kind of pulling toxins away from the body, and the 6th house is the health house. So you combine the two and do the math. Okay, Leo, that's what I have for you for June. And if you like this type of analysis, I have a Natal Chart Interpretation where I do similar things, looking at the next 12 months and some of the what I am referring to now as the astrological trends. Some people like to make predictions, but that totally takes you out of the picture. Yes, of course, you can characterize some of these things as predictions in a general sense, because transits that affect certain houses can lead to certain outcomes, provided that you also take that inspired action as well. But I'm also looking at your personality analysis. What makes you specifically, based on your exact time of birth, based on your exact birthday, what makes Leo tick? And maybe some of you will be in that contemplative state of mind after June 12th, when you have Mercury in the 12th house, and that will really resonate with you. So in any case, I will link that particular reading below, as well as my general website. But I really wish you the best in June, Leo. Take care. Bye.